It's 3:30 a.m. in a neighborhood in the city of Akron. CCTV records a man in a jumpsuit walking up to a house. Seconds later, what could only be a nightmare begins.
Akron 911.
Well, I got a fire going on Fultz Avenue. It's fully engulfed. I think there's people in the house. It's blazing, man. It's blazing. It's up here quick. I can feel it heat. The lights are going out. It's burning quick, man. If somebody's in there, they're dead, man.
As the flames engulf the house, the mysterious man disappears into the night, leaving a trail of blood behind him.
Oh my God.
Hurry, please. Oh, Jesus, the whole house is on fire.
As authorities were called to investigate, they had no idea what they were stepping into. This would only be the beginning of a series of fatal fires set by a vicious, cold-blooded killer, and detectives would soon find themselves racing against the clock as a serial arsonist hunts for his next victims. The night of April 17th, 2016 was uneventful for 66-year-old Lindell Lewis. He had just gone through a hip replacement surgery and was resting at his home on 719 Fultz Street, being looked after by Gloria Jean Hart, his girlfriend at the time. However, this night would be different. This night would plunge the once peaceful city of Akron into sheer terror. In the early hours of April 18th, close to 3:33 a.m., CCTV footage captured a man walking in the direction that led directly to Lindell's house. And moments later, tragedy would strike the house of Lindell Lewis. Because he was in a hurry to escape, this first attempt at setting the house on fire had failed and the flames died out, prompting the arsonist to make a return for a second time to make sure he finished the job. At around 3:40 a.m. and approximately 3 minutes after this second round of dousing the house with what appears to be gasoline, a raging fire would swallow up the entirety of Lindell's house. This was an early Monday morning and most people in Lane Worcester neighborhood were asleep preparing for work. No one would have been awake to see who this masked arsonist was. More importantly, whoever this was well aware of Lindell's hip surgery as it had made him wheelchair-ridden and unable to move. This meant that the fire was started knowing that he would never be able to escape. And soon enough, 911 calls would begin pouring in as the fire raged on.
Akron 911.
This is 725. It's next door. I can feel it heat. The lights are going out. It's burning quick, man. If somebody's in there, they're dead, man. Just get up here real quick.
Hey, they're on their way right now.
Presumably, Lindell and his girlfriend were sleeping in their bedroom on the upper floor of the house when the fire initially began. Since the masked arsonist ensured that the fire spread from the ground floor, this meant that by the time they woke up because of the heat and crackling of the fire, they had no escape, especially because Lindell was unable to move by himself. Gloria most likely helped Lindell move from the bed, and the couple retreated to their bedroom in an attempt to get as far away as possible. But all this did was delay the inevitable. As firefighters and EMS arrived at the scene, the elderly couple was heard screaming for help from inside their bathroom. Even with desperate attempts to save them, it was far too late. This gasoline fire was far too violent and the smoke was far too thick. Gloria Jean Hart and Lindell Lewis were pronounced dead by the time they were discovered. A tragedy like this was unheard of in Akron, not only because of the fact that there was now an arsonist on the loose, but because no one knew who his next victim would be. Because as it turns out, Lindell and Gloria were only 2 of his 9 victims to come. The hunt for this masked murderer was on, and soon enough, detectives had a lead. During the night this fire occurred, the suspect had fled in this direction immediately after his second attempt. This meant that whoever this was lived in this general vicinity, and considering this, the very first suspect would be Stanley Ford. Stanley was a peculiar man. He often claimed to be a guardian sent by God and would spend his days sleeping so he could stay awake at night to watch over the neighborhood. Additionally, Stanley was also Lindell's neighbor, and the two had spent many years living next to each other. This is why officers were certain that Stanley would react with sorrow when informed of Lindell's death. But when a call was made telling him of the tragedy, something was off.
I was calling to follow up with you about the fire across the street. You know, because of the tumultuous history that you and the people in Lindell's house had, everybody is thinking you, right?
No, Tanisha, listen to me once again. I do not mess with these people up here. Them guys tried to get me to come on and engage with them. Them guys was nasty. They had prostitutes in and out all night. They was dealing with homosexuality. Them people was just bad people. I didn't do nothing to them people. Them people were just mean. I mean, listen here. When they moved up here, Tanisha, they stole everything that wasn't voted down.
Well, Mr. Ford, this is my concern.
What's your concern?
Is that how to make people believe that it wasn't you.
Tanisha, you either take my word or you don't. That's all I can tell you.
Well, we do have another option.
What's that?
The polygraph.
Suspiciously, not only did Stanley refuse a polygraph test, but officers believed his reaction to be endorsing Lindell's death rather than mourning it. This was likely because of a low in the two's relationship that stemmed from their arguments about property boundaries and maintenance. However, in all fairness, this case was not limited to Lindell alone. In fact, Stanley was infamous for often disputing with neighbors when it came to property boundaries. All things considered, Stanley was only seen as a weird and obnoxious neighbor rather than someone who would burn a house down. For now at least, he was not the most prominent suspect, as detectives began to believe that the one responsible for this fire may have been someone inside Lindell's house. The night the fire occurred, Lindell and Gloria were not the only ones in the house. Thomas Hugley and Garrett were two of Lindell's friends who were going through tough times due to financial constraints. Lindell was kind enough to offer the two of them a place in the basement of his home. Fortunately, Thomas escaped before the fire could swallow up the basement, but Garrett, on the other hand, just so happened to be somewhere else that night. By April 22, 2016, Akron detectives would call in Garrett for an interview to find out what really happened.
First, let me say that I hate having to put you out there like that. Like all of
that was terrible. I like what that happened.
You guys, that's my first language. But I was worried because they said you lived down there, and I hadn't seen or heard from you, so I waited.
Yeah, I was there earlier that day because I was over my auntie's house doing a job for her.
Now, what's her name?
Williams. I forgot her last name. She works across the street right there.
Okay. Now, I ain't trying to, stir your brain, because the main reason I wanted to find you, make sure, one, that you safe and you okay, and to find out.
I didn't know nothing about it until my sister and them called me, and Mr. Hughley called me.
And what did they say?
They said the house burned down, but they didn't tell me nothing about nobody got hurt in there. And then my best friend.
What you talking about, Linda?
For detectives, it is definitely odd that Garrett is taking so long to remember the finer details, but this is nothing conclusive as of now. However, they are confident that by poking deeper, they might be able to find some clues.
Have you heard about anybody who got a beef with him?
No, that I know of.
Now, what was that thought you just had?
That was that I know of. Nobody I know right off the head.
That don't seem like the truth. It seems like you're choking on the truth right now.
I said, I don't know offhand, because I didn't know the people he knew.
It's obvious you just had a thought. Do you just not want to speak because all of us in here, or
no,
you not want to speak because you're at the police station?
I don't know.
You definitely had a thought right there.
All I know is they purport to have a restraining order on that guy across the street. Stand something, that's all I knew.
Stanley's name has once again crept into the conversation. In fact, rumors about Lindell and Stanley's conflicts had already spread like wildfire, and he was on his way to becoming suspect number one. But for detectives, this could mean anything. Stanley would alternatively be the most suitable for Garrett to pin his crimes on, a neighbor with a god complex who had frequent conflicts with Lindell. Furthermore, Garrett has not given any details about his alibi. All we know is that during the night of the fire, he was at his aunt's house and was spending time with his niece. This is why detectives would not let up putting pressure on Garrett.
You're the only person that ain't even gave a scenario, and that kind of made me suspicious.
Scenario means?
Of anything that you might have heard or thought. You're the only one.
But I don't know nothing. I wasn't there.
I know you weren't there.
I wasn't been there in a couple of days.
You weren't there, but you're the only one.
All right, let's do it this way. The night of the fire, the night it happened.
I was at my niece's house.
What time did you get there?
I don't know what time we got there.
Was it light outside or was it dark?
I don't know. We was intoxicated, what can I say?
We was. Who were you with?
Me and my niece.
And what time did you leave there?
The next day, I think.
What time did the fire happen?
I don't know. Thomas told me it was 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know.
Let me ask you this question. Was you going to the funeral today?
Yes. Yes.
You know what
Yes.
time it is?
It's probably at 10 o'clock. That's what they say.
I'm going to say this. I'm just going to go on straight with you. But the gut feeling I got is that you have some names swirling in your head. You just don't want to give them because you don't want to get
I
them.
don't know them.
Right.
I don't know them people.
You might not know
socialize with them people.
We need your help. We're asking for your help.
I know. I understand that. I just don't really know much, man. But, man, they protected me when I was on the football field. I had to be tackled, and they made it happen for me. They say, we ain't gonna get tackled. Oh my God. It was good times.
For detectives, this was perplexing. A suspect that was willing to cry for his dead friend and housemate, yet had no solid story for where he was on that day, created a contradicting situation. No matter what, detectives cannot be certain that Garrett is the arsonist, so they would slowly push him towards a polygraph test, claiming it's the only way to prove his innocence.
Let's see if we can't get Sergeant Butler to come in and schedule a polygraph.
Okay.
I'll call you and schedule.
No, it's his schedule.
We got a polygraph
It's his
operator
schedule.
here. We're going to bring him in here, and he's going to schedule with you. Set up an appointment.
Oh my God. This is nuts.
Anything else?
I'm about to have a fucking heart attack from you, man.
Listen, man. We're trying to help here. We're not.
I will. If I can help you, I will. I swear to God, I will.
Well, if you need to get something off your chest and let us know something that you know, you will feel a whole lot better that you're our key to the information about who
Why
started.
me? Why y'all putting it on me? I wasn't even
Because you
there.
lived in the house for 2 years.
Yeah, but I was never there on
And
it.
you're saying that you don't know or have heard anything about any
I have not. I haven't been here long enough to hear
the
anything.
car fire that happened in 2013 and you were in the house. You have no clue of who may have
You're
started.
saying nobody gave any names.
No scenarios, no theories, no nothing.
It's just not plausible, sir.
I mean, that just goes on in a normal conversation. Who do you think did this?
I don't know.
That's just part of a normal conversation.
Even though Garrett just agreed to the polygraph, just moments later, he would have second thoughts.
Mr. Garrett, this Sergeant Butler. He's
How you doing, sir?
They're saying you want to take a polygraph.
Well, I'm taking a polygraph anyway.
You just said you would. You want to. You said, well, we at it. Let me take a polygraph.
I didn't say that. I said I probably
Is that
would.
What he said.
I said I would if I needed to.
What's coming down to a need?
Oh, really?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Go ahead and talk to the sergeant here. He'll explain it.
Is that something that you'd be willing to do, is take a polygraph?
No, I changed my mind. That ain't working. Why is that working like that?
You volunteered
I
to
didn't
say
mean that. I
all
said
you
I
can take.
might.
Usually, suspects are never legally obligated to undergo a polygraph test. Even if they did, these tests are not presentable in court due to a lack of accuracy and reliability, since results are affected by several factors like anxiety and mental and physical health. And with Garrett's insistence that he is innocent and was not at Lindell's house often, detectives are stuck with no other suspects. Their only remaining choice was Stanley Ford, the self-proclaimed neighborhood guardian. But at this point, this was more of a gut feeling for detectives, as they could not put up a plausible case against him for an arrest. In their eyes, many suspects were just as suspicious as Stanley, if not more. This meant the Akron arsonist was still on the loose, and maybe these investigations had scared him, because things seemed to settle down. For the entirety of 2016, there were no more fires, and most began to forget about the incident. However, this peace would soon come to an end. On January 23, 2017, someone set fire to a vehicle on 723 Russell Avenue, just a few blocks away from the first fire. The next 2 months would be another wave of silence from the arsonist until May 15, 2017, when close to 3 a.m., Lane Worcester neighborhood was given another rude awakening.
Multiple people are dead after a house fire in Akron this morning, and at least some were children.
The Akron Fire Department says the home was fully engulfed when they arrived. The heat was so high, a staircase melted away. The exact number of victims has not been released.
A fire on 693 Fultz Avenue had resulted in the death of 7 people. 35-year-old Dennis Huggins and 38-year-old Angela Boggs, along with their 5 children, aged between 16 months and 14 years. This was the second major fire after the Lindell home was burned to a crisp 13 months prior. The fire had started in trash cans placed at the front of the house and spread quickly through the porch into the home. However, this was no accident. According to a forensic analysis, an accelerant identified as gasoline was dumped into the cans. The flames were intense and enveloped the house within seconds. There was no room for escape. And just like the first fire, all 7 victims were found huddled in corners of the home as they had been trapped by the smoke and flames. The bodies had been burnt so badly that the only way to identify them was through a DNA test. This was a tragedy. But compared to the first fire, finding the suspect this time wouldn't be hard, as there were only 2 options. The first was Patrick Boggs, who had a bit of history with Angela Boggs, the mother of the children in this fire. Patrick Boggs served 12 years in prison for dousing Angela in kerosene and threatening to set her on fire in 2001. He was a violent man and had even tried to stab someone, making him a very plausible suspect. But even with his past, Patrick was quickly discarded as cameras provided he had never left his home in Ohio. More importantly, an extensive polygraph test proved that Patrick was telling the truth about not being involved in this crime. However, his role in these murders wouldn't end here, as we'd later find out. For now, the only remaining suspect was a familiar face, one that was a common denominator in both fires: Stanley Ford. And this time, officers were prepared to gather a mountain of evidence against him.
They treat me like I'm a suspect, man. I'm not a suspect.
The first step was to obtain a search warrant for Stanley's home, which would result in a crucial piece of evidence being found: worn-out tennis shoes that had been covered in an accelerant. An accelerant that just so happened to be gasoline. But the evidence wouldn't end here. One of the detectives would decide to have a one-on-one conversation with Stanley in his car, and what he says would be nothing short of disturbing.
No, listen what I'm saying to you, Stanley.
This is so wrong,
Stanley, listen what I'm saying to you.
Embarrassing to my neighbors.
Listen what I'm saying to you. You mentioned some things last night about there's some bad people at the house, or...
Well, to me, I thought they was bad kids. Well, the stuff they was just doing immature stuff in the neighborhood.
Like what?
Shit, kicking vehicles, rear view mirrors, busting them out and stuff like that.
Is that a good way to get rid of somebody moving out the neighborhood or get rid of that?
No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do it like that. Why would I do that? I wouldn't do it at all. I ain't gonna set somebody on fire just to get them out of the neighborhood. That ain't godly, like, man. That ain't human nature, like that.
Yeah, that's evil. That's pure evil, ain't it?
Man, I'm not evil, man.
Yet another instance of Stanley Ford justifying not only the deaths of the couple, but of their 5 innocent little children too. Just like in the murder of Lindell Lewis, there was a pattern of pure hatred towards the victims. A pattern so disgusting that Stanley felt it was his God-given right to purge anyone who upset the guardian of the neighborhood. In this case, Stanley often accused the family of dealing drugs, damaging his property, and engaging in illegal activities, which only fueled his hatred towards them. Several neighbors had witnessed heated exchanges between the couple and Stanley leading up to the fire. Not only that, but the night of the fire, neighbors mentioned how they saw Stanley continuously patrolling the house. This would be corroborated by CCTV footage that would not only catch Stanley walking towards the house right before the fire, but also running away from it after. If all of this was not compelling enough, there would be one last piece of evidence that would solve the mystery of the Akron arsonist. Take a look at this footage from the 2016 fire of Lindell's home. Now, matching this with the footage from the 2017 fire, and matching both with the footage from when police spoke with Stanley in the neighborhood, there is one correlation. The way the suspect walks is exactly the same as Stanley's stride. Without a doubt, Stanley was the one responsible for the cold-blooded murders of 9 people. Officers were now certain of this, and soon enough, Stanley was called in for an interview to be confronted with his sick crimes.
We want to talk to you. I want you to be honest with me.
Okay. I've been honest.
Let's talk about
the day in question. Let's go back to the fire. Yeah. What about it? Okay. What can you tell us about the fire?
I don't have no knowledge of that. So what's the point? You know, sometimes I explain to them, you know, I exercise, sometimes I get Charlie horses. Right. Sometimes I walk the street and back. You know what I mean? Something like that. But I didn't do that fire, man.
In the face of these denials, detectives decide that enough is enough. No matter what, they need a confession out of Stanley, and the best way to do that is to show him all the evidence that points towards him being the arsonist.
As you running back to the house.
Mm-hmm.
At the time of the fire. Okay.
Right.
We got you running to the house. You're not asleep.
You weren't.
You're on the camera, Stanley.
I want no camera running from the fire.
Stanley,
You're on the
camera running from a fire?
We got you.
Yeah.
I didn't run from no fire.
Stanley, listen.
Yeah.
It's time to come. It's time to
Man, listen. Yeah.
We know the answers, okay?
Right.
Okay. But I wasn't running from no fire.
Okay, you walk. You see the fire, okay? You're at the fire.
No. I'm not at no fire.
You're at the fire.
I'm at a fire?
Yeah, you're at the fire.
Yeah. Go ahead.
We need to hear your side of the story.
Johnny, I'm being honest, man. I didn't do anything. I mean, I can't admit to something I didn't do. I wouldn't have dared to did that. I got too much to lose, man.
We got all the pieces. We know the answers. This is what we want to know. Is there some reasoning or some kind of something that happened, man? Did somebody piss you off or somebody do something?
No.
To maybe why? Maybe, like I said, maybe trying to send a message.
I wasn't at nobody's fire. I'm allowed to walk the neighborhood. I wasn't at nobody's house. I'm walking.
Explain why you running back from the house.
I didn't do that. Oh, yeah, I'll tell you, I got the wrong. Well, you know. Okay, we got you.
Often a suspect will refute their crimes even in the presence of concrete evidence, as this would still give them a fighting chance in court. In this case, Stanley is doing exactly this, and no matter what detectives say, he won't be cracking anytime soon.
Y'all believe that I did it?
No, we proved that you done it.
I didn't do that. I wouldn't have dared to did that, man.
Do you want me to explain the charges to you, or do you want
to explain them? I didn't do it. I'm serious. I didn't do it. I'm not going to admit to that. I didn't do it. If I did, I admit to it. I didn't do that.
Let me explain the charges.
Go ahead.
Okay. You have 7 counts of aggravated murder.
However, this would be far from the end of Stanley's saga. Because he never admitted to anything and had a history of being mentally unstable, there was a chance that he could get away completely scot-free in court due to his mental status being absolved of all his crimes.